The following presentation is made possible by a grant from the insurance firm of Lester Smart, Fairman, Tremmel, and Arndt, 210 9th Street South, and by the Southwood County Historical Corporation, 543rd Street South, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin.
It's time for part 2 of our picture postcard past and another get-together with our local postcard and memorabilia collector, Phil Brown. Welcome, Phil.
Well, thanks, Paul. I've been looking forward to once again being part of this venture into the past. In part 1, we pretty much covered the origin of picture postcards. So why don't we get right into it and kind of pick up where we left off?
But Phil, before we get into the postcards, I'd like to bring on some snow. You know, folks often talk about the winters we used to have. Oddly enough, there are no winter postcards of old Grand Rapids or Wisconsin Rapids for that matter. So I'd like to show some of the excellent winter photos taken by Don Krohn when he was associated with the Rapids Tribune. It was about 1950 when this photo was taken from what we used to call the West Side Market Square. Don's camera is facing northwest. The First National Bank is visible on the right. The rest of the buildings are long gone. At the time, 3rd Avenue was straight. The present-day jog in the road was made later to accommodate the Walmart building, which is now home to our beautiful Centralia Center. In this second Krohn photo, a rural mailman makes his delivery in his Kaiser automobile. Remember the Kaiser? We dealt with the Kaiser Fraser Car Company in a previous video. And here's another taste of winter's past, showing Carl Polansky's wrecker giving a motorist a push start on a cold winter morning. Back in the 40s and 50s, our cars still used a 6-volt system. For this and other reasons, they often failed to start in extreme cold. No doubt another reason that our winters seemed to be more harsh. But then came March. The water began to trickle under the ice in the curb, making its way to the nearest catch basin, and out came the marbles. Phil, I'd almost forgotten how as kids we all played marbles in the spring. Every year, about that time, Louis Sugart's Woolworth store would have a large display of marbles, and every kid, boys that is, seemed to have a cloth or leather bag of marbles. I remember the best marbles were called Keneals and cost about a nickel each. The ordinary marbles were 3 for a nickel. You see, there were no fancy planned programs in those days. We used our imagination, made our own fun, and had a great time doing it. So with that bit of winter behind us, let's get on with our postcards.
Our postcard journey begins right here on West Grand Avenue in July of 2007 as we drift back 67 years to the way it was about 1940. Moving in for a closer look, the detail of this photo is quite revealing. Most of the cars shown here would be quite collectible in today's market, and wouldn't it be nice to know who that pretty girl is on the bicycle? The F.W. Woolworth store dominated the corner of 3rd and West Grand. The next store was Demro's China and Art Shop, which featured fine china and linens. Next to Demro's was Bernstein's, a woman's fashion store. The signs in the remainder of the block pretty much tell the rest of the story. Now we move up 10 years to 1950, when our next postcard reveals that the Woolworth store has expanded into the former Demro's location, and Bernstein's has been taken over by Newton's, also a woman's wear store. We can't resist showing you the same intersection as it appeared in this December 1950 photo by Don Krohn, all decked out for Christmas. At the Wisconsin Theater, Maureen O'Hara was starring in the 1950 blockbuster Tripoli. Putting up those Christmas trimmings meant climbing lots of ladders. There was no such thing as a fancy hoist in those days. It was all manual labor. In spite of all the Christmas cheer, you could still earn yourself a ticket if you overstayed your parking time. From here, our camera moves over to Lyons Park and once again takes us back in time to another era. The year was 1972 when this photo was taken showing the west end of the old Northwestern Railroad Bridge. The present Riverview Expressway follows the route of this old railroad right-of-way, and let it be hereby recorded that at that time, First Avenue passed along the river's edge, under the bridge, through the park, and curved out to an exit on 2nd Avenue. The first eastern stop for the Northwestern out of Grand Rapids was Kellner. This rare old postcard shows the Kellner Depot, perhaps a busy place in the days before the automobile.
Phil, my brother Bob treated me to my first train ride from Wisconsin Rapids to Kellner in February of 1937. The trip cost 15 cents, and by that time, there was no depot at Kellner. From there, we walked all the way home back to Rapids on that cold February day.
How about that? Sure beats sitting at home playing a video game. On the subject of railroads, it was in the 1930s through the 50s when train travel reached its peak in speed and comfort. A time when the beautiful Hiawatha whisked us to Milwaukee, Chicago, and the Twin Cities at speeds often exceeding 100 miles an hour. Always right on time, always in comfort with plenty of room to stretch and relax. The Northwestern Railroad competed with their luxurious 400, first powered by the steam locomotive and later a diesel streamliner. The name 400 symbolized the train's route and speed, 400 miles from Chicago to Minneapolis in 400 minutes. Our connection to the 400 was by bus to Adams, where we boarded the train on the main line. What a treat it was to relax in the beautiful cocktail lounge, where even a speedometer was included so that passengers could check on the speed of this marvel of the rails. Dinner in the diner was the ultimate experience. Beautiful meals prepared on board were served by smartly uniformed attendants as the ever-changing world passed just outside your window. If you were traveling with a first-class ticket, you rode in the parlor car with all the comforts of home. Try this on an airplane? I don't think so. Now, moving to the east bank of the river, let's journey back about 60 years to a very detailed postcard of the Witter Hotel. This view was taken about 1940, and as we move in very close, there are many revealing things about this photo that it's fun to discover. For example, if you look very closely at the barbershop area, you can see the barber in his smock framed by the open screen door. Now you ask, why a screen door on a barbershop? Because in those days there was no air conditioning to circulate the air, and he probably couldn't afford a fan. Also in the window on the right, you can see the reflection of the Deep Rock gas station, located just across the street. Now, notice the two planters at the entrance to the Witter and how they are tilting. Obviously, the Witter was beginning to show its age. Way down at the north end of the building was Jackson's Tavern, where a Schlitz beer sign is evident. Schlitz, the beer that made Milwaukee famous and got old New York drunk. In 1950, the Witter was replaced by the Mead. This unusual view of the hotel was not too widely circulated. The original cocktail lounge featured a glass-top piano where folks could sing along with the music. There was no such thing as karaoke at the time, but many a great happy hour was enjoyed at this piano. It was a time when large expense accounts were tax deductible. Changes don't always take place slowly. For example, just across the street from the Mead is our fairly new Macmillan Library. Now watch it change right before your eyes into this 2007 view. The dedication of this fountain, donated by Charles and Joanne Lester, marked the completion of a massive remodeling project at the library. But now we're getting a little too modern. So let's back off a bit and position ourselves right here at the intersection of 5th and Oak Streets, facing south, just as another photographer did many years ago. The home in the distant right side of the picture is one of two that were removed to make room for the Macmillan Library. In the distance is the old Lincoln High School. The city water tower on the left was a familiar landmark in many of our local history photos. Photographer Don Krohn captured this photo sometime in the 50s when the water tower was dismantled and replaced by a new water tower near the old Irving School. A surprising number of photos were taken from the top of this water tower, like this bird's eye view of the Grand Rapids Baseball Park, as it was called. Back down to earth, this postcard gives us another view of the Grand Rapids Ballpark. Notice that there are practically no houses visible in the area. If you have a ballpark, you have to have a team. And here we have a postcard showing some of the local sluggers of the time. This could be two separate teams, since some of the boys are wearing Grand Rapids uniforms. Others represent Elks Club number 693. Handwriting on the back of the postcard refers to it as the Lawyers and Doctors Ball Team. I guess we'll never know. Golf was also catching on about this time, and this undated postcard shows some of the classy vehicles parked at the Bullseye Country Club in the late 20s. Back now to our water tower area and a postcard of the old Lincoln High School. We've used this picture before, but now we'd like to take you inside of the building since we recently discovered the next two postcards. This was the Lincoln High Assembly Room. This postcard was photographed prior to 1920. Possibly some of your relatives are packed into this room. And look at those books stashed into each of the desks. The second view gives another perspective of the area. Notice that the girls all wear long sleeves and high neck blouses, and most of the boys wore a shirt, tie, and jacket. What a different time it was. The old Lincoln High School building was connected on the south to the Witter building by an overhead walkway. Built in 1902, the Witter building was named after J.D. Witter, who died in that year and left $50,000 to be used for the Manual Arts School. It was a place where students could take courses in drafting, machine shop, printing, auto mechanics, and home economics. When the new Lincoln High School was built in the 1930s, the Witter building was retained, but access was at ground level only. Just to the south of the Witter building was the Wood County Normal, a school for older students, most aspiring to become teachers. This was the assembly room of the school. There are no low-cut dresses in this room, and torn blue jeans were unimaginable. This postcard was used to announce the June 15th, 1915 graduation at the Wood County Normal, a very sizable class at the time. Now, let's move back to Oak Street. Here, facing west, we are located in the area of 8th and Oak Streets as we move back to this colorful postcard. You see, Oak Street was once a very important thoroughfare in the community, at a time when Grand Avenue went only as far east as 3rd Street. Neat curbing lines each side of the dirt road, and by the looks of the tracks, it appears that most drivers use the center of the road in this era of little traffic. For what it's worth, you may be interested to know that Oak Street between 8th and 16th Streets was the first street ever to be blacktopped in the city of Wisconsin Rapids. Another very important street was Washington Street, which was once part of the route to Stevens Point. This beautiful card is postmarked July 21st, 1911. The home on the left was the mansion of F.W. Wood, who the county is named after. That subject was covered in several previous videos. Again, paved sidewalks and curbing enhanced the area. There was a period of time when Washington Street was called Washington Avenue. It was around 1930 when the name was changed back to street because it was confused with the avenues on the west side of the river. The Wood Mansion appears pretty much as it did when Mr. Wood built it years ago, and a beautiful carriage house still stands on the property. Quite a few of these local mansions were depicted on the early postcards. This street was once called Water Street. Of course, it's First Street as we know it today. And even though the street name has changed, these two old Arpin mansions have changed very little. In fact, both have recently been restored to their original elegance. The folks on 3rd Street were not about to be outdone by the Arpins, and the result was some of the very fine homes that at one time were referred to as Quality Row. On the left was the Lawrence Nash home, and on the right was the Witter residence, which is now home to the Southwood County Historical Corporation. It was in the late 1890s when a Mr. Earl Pease connected Bell Island to the mainland with this bridge and built himself a home on the island. Sometime later, perhaps around 1910, George W. Mead purchased the island, made extensive improvements to the bridge, and built this fine new home on the property. Still later, Mr. Mead provided a residence on the island for his daughter Emily and her husband Henry Baldwin. The residential pride of the west side of the river was the Thomas Nash residence. Built in 1901, this home was later owned by Stanton Mead, who received it as a wedding gift from his father, George Mead. For a time after Stanton's passing, it served as headquarters for Northland Cranberries. It is now owned by the Mead Witter Foundation, and it is the home of the new Wisconsin River Papermakers Museum. Now we do an about face, where more changes come into view with a rare old postcard version of First Avenue facing north. In the distance is the former Moravian church tower, and just to the right is the old iron bridge. We were a proud community when that bridge was replaced by the beautiful concrete bridge shown here about 1925. Notice the streetcar tracks. The tall poles were used to support the trolley wires. In those early days, electric wires were all over the place, like in this 1927 picture of the First National Bank corner. And even though today we have more of them, most have been moved underground or into alleys. Many of you will still remember this building, our old City Hall at 441 West Grand Avenue. Built in 1917, here we see it as it was being demolished in 1980 to make room for the Rapids Mall. Just across the street at 420 West Grand Avenue was the Guarantee Hardware and Blinkers TV. In this view, the buildings are vacant, awaiting the wrecking crew. A little further up the street at 619 West Grand Avenue was Red's Dixie Bar, which had a fine patronage and at times included entertainment. Across the street from the Dixie Bar was Romansky's Hotel and Tavern, where one could enjoy a very pleasant evening of good beverages and conversation. There were many family taverns like this in the city, but for this presentation, we've only touched on a few of those that were featured on postcards. Postcards were also used for advertising, just as they are today. This card promoting the Grand Rapids Business College is a good example. The Grand Rapids Business College was located on the second floor of the building at 150 2nd Street North, over the Lewis hardware store. The back side of this card says, "It's hard to make an empty bag stand upright." I hope they weren't referring to the lady on the front. A little humor there. Which reminds me, it's about time we showed some more of those comic postcards that promoted old Grand Rapids.
You know, Phil, speaking of that, I've had a number of people ask me where we found that old-time music that accompanied those cards in part one of these videos. Actually, I made that recording directly from one of John Alexander's favorite toys, an old air-operated orchestra machine. This musical link with our past is now the proud possession of John's daughter and her husband, Charles and Joanne Lester.
I understand that the Lesters had the machine rebuilt a while back, and now it's in pristine condition.
That's right, Phil. And Chuck would like to show it to us. So take it away, Charlie. Okay, you start her up, Charlie.